This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, it is Thursday, June 25th. I am very glad you have joined me today. It's not, oh God, do I jinx myself if I say this? It's not a hugely busy news day. Ooh, you know, when I worked as a reporter, we would really jump on somebody who said that it was a quiet day or that it was a slow day, because that was exactly all the universe needed to hear before something really awful happened. Something really awful has happened in Venezuela. They have had a couple of really bad earthquakes. There are at least 146 confirmed dead, but officials believe the death toll could be in the thousands. It is incredible devastation. Apartment buildings coming down. I'm sure you have seen the pictures by now. So our hearts go out to them. I hope the death toll turns out to be a lot less than people suspect, okay? Oh, the death toll, I just saw a new death toll. It's 188 now. It was 164 this morning. Part of the reason why there was a problem, you know, usually you get a big quake, like a 7 something, and then there's a period of quiet, and then there's an aftershock. An aftershock is usually pretty severe, but not as big as the first one. Well, they had 2 earthquakes over 7 within a minute or 2 of each other. So it really was a 1-2 punch. And, you know, the devastation, you know, the president of Venezuela is the woman that Trump allowed to take over after he kidnapped Maduro and his wife. And by all accounts, this is going to be probably the biggest challenge she has seen so far. Here in the United States, you know how you know it's kind of a quiet news day? You know, I always, I do a lot of reading in the morning, but I also keep an eye on CNN, because sometimes CNN has breaking news before it shows up on the mainstream sites. Today on CNN, there was an extended segment on, is Ted Cruz going to run for president in 2028? Oh, looks like it. J.D. Vance was asked about it. He didn't seem to take it very seriously. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, so that's a big story, but you know what was an even bigger story than that and required more reporting and more time on CNN? Is it true that Taylor Swift and Jason Kelce are going to get married in Madison Square Garden? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Seriously? There have been announcements on social media that not only is the wedding scheduled to take place in Madison Square Garden, I guess they have a big guest list, but there have been reports that the wedding is going to take place before the 4th of July. Oh my goodness. Who cares? You know, God love them. I hope it works out. I really do. Good luck to them both. Yeah. Okay. So, the Republicans are still trying to talk to Trump, who is still saying that he's not going to sign this bipartisan bill to make housing more affordable that everybody loves. He's not going to sign it. No. You know why? Because the SAVE Act still hasn't been passed. Part of the reason why he was supposed to go to the Senate Republican regular Wednesday lunch yesterday was so that senators could explain to him that they do not have the votes to pass the SAVE Act. It's a numbers game, and the numbers aren't there. And that was why he had told them, we'll get rid of the filibuster, because then you only need 51, not 60. And John Thune said he was going to tell the president in this lunch yesterday, even if we do that, we don't have the votes. And what I hope John Thune said, and know for a fact that he doesn't have the spine to say, would have been, you know, Mr. President, if you really wanted to make sure that there were more Republican Senate votes for you, maybe you shouldn't have messed around with Tom Tillis and Bill Cassidy and John Cornyn. You know, maybe you should have looked at the bigger picture here rather, but Trump couldn't. He had to wreak revenge on those people, even if it's going to hurt him in the long run. So he is now saying he's not going to sign this housing bill. I don't know if he's actually going to veto it or if he's just going to refuse to sign it. If he vetoes it, there will have to be a vote to override the veto, and I personally think it will be overridden. If he just refuses to sign it, then I believe it is after a 10-day period, the bill becomes law. If the president doesn't get around to signing a bill but doesn't veto it, it will automatically become law in 10 days. But now that's the latest thing that he's holding hostage. Remember, at this meeting yesterday, he and Bill Cassidy, yes, the Bill Cassidy that he basically got thrown out of the Senate, he and Bill Cassidy started yelling at one another and ended up shouting at one another. And after that, Donald Trump decided that he had had enough of the Senate lunch and he was going to leave. Bill Cassidy explained that Trump raised his voice to him, so he raised his voice back, and then Trump raised his voice more, and Bill Cassidy raised his voice more. But at least Bill Cassidy was enough of an adult to say, you know, I lost my temper and I shouldn't have. Donald Trump hasn't said anything about it. He hasn't even acknowledged that there was an argument. He just came out of that meeting saying, well, you know, it was a great meeting. It was a great meeting. It was a great talk. You know, I like almost everybody in that room. You know, there are a few of them in that room I don't like, but you probably know who they are. And you could, if you really listen closely, you can hear a reporter off camera saying, well, who is it that you don't like? And then he kind of gets this little grin and he says, you know, I'm not going to tell you. I might tell you later. He said, maybe you can figure out who it is. So, yeah, Republicans had one thing that they could bring to the midterms and brag about. And he has taken that away from them. Again, he's having this snit because they won't pass legislation that doesn't have the votes. And he is ignoring the bigger picture that Republicans have very little to brag about when it comes to the midterms, and the one big thing that they could have pointed to, he has now taken away from them. It's almost like he's trying to make sure there's a Democratic majority, not just in the House, but also in the Senate. It's almost like he's trying to ensure it. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I think I love more every day. She was on CNN last night with Caitlin Collins, and she talked about this housing bill that Donald Trump is refusing to sign. I thought what she had to say was really fun and really interesting and really insightful. So let's listen. This is the Caitlin Collins show last night on CNN. Senator Elizabeth Warren. Listen to this.
When the president first announced that he was not going to be signing this bill today, what was your first reaction?
I thought it was some kind of joke. I really did. I thought it was a Borowitz report of some kind, because the Republicans were already out there trying to take credit for the bill, talking about what a great bill it is. And they should, because it is a great bill. When's the last time you saw a bill that could pass the Senate with huge margins? Democrats and Republicans passed the House with huge margins. And understand, it didn't pass because we watered everything down to, we'll do a study or a blue ribbon commission. This bill says private equity, stay out. You cannot move into one neighborhood after another, buy up all the residential housing, and turn America from a nation of owners to a nation of
Which is an issue the White House has touted. But, you know, the president, as he was talking about this, I mean, he seemed to signal this kind of last night if you were watching Truth Social. He said, quote, the Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren-centric housing bill is of minor importance compared to lowering interest rates. And he said Republicans should terminate the filibuster, pass the SAVE Act instead. I mean, 192 Republicans in the House voted for it, or in Congress in total, I think, if that's in the House, that's and right. Who in the Senate
and
voted for
85 voted for it, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. But, you know, I want to focus for just 1 minute on his point about interest rates. I'd like to see interest rates come down, too.
Yeah, you agree.
I would like to see interest rates come down. But remember why interest rates are up. It's because prices are going up. And why are they going up? Trump tariffs are driving up prices basically for everything you buy that has been imported. Energy policy that is taking renewable, the cheapest energy, offline. Healthcare policy that has driven up the cost of health insurance and health care for tens of millions of Americans. And starting a bombing war halfway around the world that has shut down the Straits of Hormuz and driven up the cost of gasoline and everything that has to be.
But it kind of sounds like he might veto the bill.
Well, look, that's not going to bring down interest rates. He wants to bring down interest rates. High interest rates are laid directly at Donald Trump's feet. He wants to bring them down, then reverse the Donald Trump policies that are pushing up costs for families.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. The voice of reason. You know, she's also said something recently that I hope the Ellison family is paying attention to. She said that when Democrats regain control of the government, that it was quite likely that they would move to reverse some of the mega mergers being approved under the Trump administration. I can think of two mega mergers. That's News Nation and Tegna. They're going to end up owning something like 239 local stations around the country, far exceeding the percentage of local stations that a company is allowed to own. And if that isn't enough, we've got the David Ellison, let's buy Paramount. Oh, by the way, let's buy Warner Brothers Discovery. And then we will control not only CBS, when we've already shown you how we feel news should be, but then we will control CNN. And there have been reports. Remember, there were reports that David Ellison had a private meeting with Brendan Carr and made promises that were never put in writing, promises that David Ellison has been questioned about and has never denied or admitted to. The fact that supposedly David Ellison made Brendan Carr the promise that if he looked kindly on the Paramount merger, Ellison would make sure that Stephen Colbert lost his show. He's been asked about that repeatedly. It is a rumor that dogs him, and he has never denied it. So we already know that Donald Trump has said he doesn't like Aaron Burnett. He doesn't like Breonna Keeler. Who else is CNN going to get rid of to placate him? he's a big reason why why they tried to move Jim Acosta to basically the middle of the night. A move that he graciously refused, and he's now doing independent journalism. If I were a Brianna, man, oh man, I would be socking away money like nobody's business. Because there is the very real possibility that she may be out of a job sooner rather than later. Now, Brendan Carr has already said the Ellisons can take over Warner Brothers Discovery, but it is still believed that at least 3 states attorneys general are planning to go to court to fight the merger. So they're not out of the woods yet. But, and the weird thing is, I don't know what he dislikes about Erin Burnett, because I don't watch her every day, but I've seen her a few times, and she seems, I don't know. She doesn't seem that offensive to me. There's no sharp tongue about her on the occasions I've watched her. And also the thing about Erin Burnett, CNN has a real problem with the 25 to 54 demographic that's supposed to be the demographic that advertisers want you to have, in the mistaken belief that somehow they have more money to spend than baby boomers, which never has made sense to me. Erin Burnett is one of their anchors who has the best demographics. More of the advertiser sought after age group watches Erin Burnett than almost every other show on CNN. But would they find a reason to get rid of her if they feel that that's what Donald Trump wants? Sure. Why not? Why not? There is, I said this wasn't a big news day. Well, there is some news coming out of the Supreme Court, and none of it's good. They dropped a number of decisions, and pretty much every decision was 6-3. What does that tell you? 6 conservatives, 6 Republicans with robes, and 3 justices that actually believe that the kind of things that people want should be the law. So they gave Trump more power over immigration. Roundup, that weed killer that has been proven to cause cancer. Yeah, the Supreme Court said, yeah, you know what? No, no, we don't think so. Nope. Basically, it was a pro-Trump, anti-consumer Lollapalooza from the Supreme Court today. And when Democrats are back in power, if expanding the Supreme Court isn't one item on the top 10 things to get done, there's going to be trouble in River City. These justices, like Donald Trump, they want to give Donald Trump and the Republicans everything they want in the short term. No, nobody can sue you for giving them cancer. No, Donald Trump can get rid of any immigrant he wants. It's his job. They are planting the seeds of their own destruction. The more they rule against what is good and right and the average person believes is true and right, the more they do that, the more support there is going to be for a Democratic effort to increase the number of justices. And they will whine loud and long, because that will mean they can't make all their decisions anymore just based on Republican politics. Yes, that is exactly what it means. And maybe, just maybe, if you didn't seem so anti-American, anti-freedom right now, maybe it wouldn't happen. Or if it was suggested, it might have less support than it's going to have. But all somebody has to do is say, let me tell you the things that the Supreme Court has ruled on in the last Well, how far do we go back? Corporations are people. The Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. How far do we go back for all the decisions that are not reflective of the country? And at least 2 or 3 of the justices with Dobbs actually lied to Congress. Oh, no, I'm not even going to talk about that because it's precedent. And we all know nobody touches precedent. Except they did, seemingly without a care in the world. By the way, you know, this week I have been focusing. There's an organization called Fair and Just, where it's a nationwide organization where women who have experienced trauma in their life because of these new restrictive abortion laws come out and tell their stories. They tell their stories publicly. They tell their stories to lawmakers in an attempt to try to make them understand the costs, the dangers in what they're doing. Here in Illinois today, Governor Pritzker has signed new legislation. It is going to protect our health records, reproductive health records, to make sure that our health records on this matter stay private. Now, you would think that would be a given, right? But we have discovered that nothing can be counted on. Nothing. This new law will say that healthcare providers and insurance cannot give out a patient's abortion or gender-affirming care records, especially to out-of-state providers, employers, or other third parties without explicit consent. We're doing it right in Illinois, thank God. Governor Pritzker talked about what he was doing today with this signing of this bill. He talked about what the bill was about. It's called the Reproductive Health Records Privacy Act. And here's Governor Pritzker talking about that.
I'm proud to be signing today the Reproductive Health Records Privacy Act, legislation that strengthens protections for patients' personal information by prohibiting sharing of abortion-related medical records with out-of-state healthcare providers without explicit patient consent. A woman seeking care should not have to wonder whether her private health information could be used against her. A healthcare provider should not have to fear that patient records will become a tool for political prosecution and persecution. And no state should be allowed to weaponize medical information in an effort to undermine rights that are protected here. Healthcare records exist to treat patients, not surveil and punish them. I will always stand firmly on the side of privacy, dignity, and freedom, and this bill is yet another example of what has become a defining commitment of our state. While lawmakers elsewhere seek to roll back rights, Illinois will protect our people.
We are going to take a break. Of course, the phone lines are open, 773-763-9278. When we come back, we're going to hear Governor Pritzker expound a little more on the whole situation right now with reproductive rights. But we will be back with that and your texts and your calls right after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Find rebates and discounts on energy-efficient products at ComEd.com/home savings.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
It is Thursday, Monday through Thursday. For the first hour of the show, we read your texts and take your calls. 773-763-9278. I know this has happened before, but once again, the text line is malfunctioning, keeps freezing up, won't reload, goes blank. I'm working on it. I will continue to work on it. But, you know, once it comes back, all the texts that you've sent will show up. So If you feel like taking a chance, send me a text. And I don't know why this happens. I will see if I can get it fixed. I told you that I wanted to share with you not just Governor Pritzker announcing this new Reproductive Health Records Privacy Act, but talking about it, putting it in context, especially since the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. Let's listen to Governor Pritzker again.
4 years ago, the right wing on the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, eliminating a right that women in this country have relied upon for nearly half a century. The consequences of that decision have been devastating. Since Dobbs, states across this nation have enacted draconian abortion bans, restricted access to life-saving health care, and empowered politicians to interfere in the personal medical decisions of women. Patients have been denied treatment. Providers have been threatened with prosecution. Women have been forced to travel hours to receive medical care. Over those 4 years, we've witnessed real legislated misogyny. But we've also seen remarkable courage. We've seen women come forward to tell their stories. We've seen advocates refuse to back down, and we've seen healthcare professionals continue showing up for their patients despite unprecedented threats. We've seen people across the country march and protest and stand up to say that reproductive freedom is worth fighting for. The state of Illinois has pushed back on the anti-woman, anti-choice policies imposed by the Supreme Court and the Trump administration. Today, we're taking another step forward in our pursuit of freedom. That is our governor. I am beyond grateful that I live in the state of Illinois. I am beyond grateful for the laws we are enacting to try to protect ourselves from the worst abuses of the Supreme Court and the federal government. We will get through this, and I think when we get to the other side, I hope that states like Illinois will prove to be a template for either federal legislation or legislation that other states can adopt once they regain their sanity. Okay, how about that? Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Ron's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Hello, yes. You here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Oh, yeah, I hear bells. In Paris, France, yesterday, the temperature was a record-breaking 105 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think Trump will be going back there anytime soon?
Well, I don't know. Is his makeup sweat-proof? I guess that would have a lot to do with it. They are having in Europe, and France particularly, some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded in the history of the recorded temperatures of Europe and France.
Yeah. And after Trump had that cage match a couple of days ago, the turf around the White House needed $1 million worth of repairs, and the Scott company, who makes, by the way, Roundup weed killer, they are going to put the turf in for free. And just by the way, the Scott company contributed a lot of money to Trump's campaign to be president, and Trump later on issued an executive order saying that Roundup is, not harmful. It's okay.
Yep. Yeah. We're in crazy times. I just hope that, I think that the elections, everybody was all aghast and agog that 3 Democratic socialists that Zoran Mamdani backed all got elected to Congress, 2 of them defeating longtime Democratic incumbents or short-term Democratic incumbents. I think that this doesn't mean that the country's turning to socialism. I think they're focusing on candidates who don't take a lot of corporate money, candidates who talk about the price of housing the price of gas, the price of food. Those are the candidates that are going to get elected in the midterms. And I don't frankly care whether they're Democratic socialists or whether they're regular Democrats. I think the idea of the corporate Democrat or the middle of the road Democrat or the Democrat that takes money from very unpopular PACs like AIPAC, I think people have had enough of it. And the Democratic Party has been slow to respond. And I think that that these recent elections should be a wake-up call to the people in power, like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who seem to be slow to grasp what voters want. I don't know, Ron.
Yeah. And also the country of Colombia, they elected a new president. The progressive candidate lost. And if you can pronounce the new president's name, there'll be a challenge. Look it up.
Okay, I will.
All right, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for the call. I got a text from somebody that suggested we read Leah Littman's book. The title is Lawless, How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. That's from Richard. Richard, I'm pretty sure when that book first came out, we talked to Leah Littman. But you know what? That would be a good interview. She would be a good person to revisit, especially here in June, where, you know, the Supreme Court is going to be dumping all these decisions. And if today is any indication, we're not going to be happy with their decisions. Somebody posted on social media that, you know, don't be confused when the Supreme Court finally rules that the 14th Amendment is actually the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship is the law of the land. Don't use that decision to get them off the hook for all these other decisions that are really bad ones. So we will do that, and we will see if we can get Leah Littman back here. For a moment, the text line does seem to be up and running. Oh, and people are also pointing out, because you know what? You guys are more cynical than I am. I want you to know that. You know, I'm talking about how unless Trump officially vetoes this housing bill, it will become law in 10 days. And then everybody's pointing out, well, you know, Mike Johnson could send the Congress home, and that 10-day rule only applies if Congress is in session. Well, that could very well be the case. But let's hope little Mikey won't do that, okay? Come on. You know, we got enough bad stuff happening to be upset about. Let's not curse ourselves by worrying about things that haven't happened yet. If little Mikey does that, sends the House of Representatives. See, here's why I don't think he will. I think that they're right now, I think that they are desperately working behind the scenes to get Trump to capitulate because, as I said at the top of the show, in this upcoming midterm election, what do the Republicans have to brag about? What? Iran war that they refused to rein in by not supporting a War Powers Act? Probably not that. Gas prices coming down? Well, they haven't, so probably not that. Grocery prices coming down? Nope, that hasn't happened either. This is like their one thing to say, look, we did this. And if Mike Johnson puts the Congress in recess to prevent this from becoming law, I think he's going to have a lot of problems with his own party. Because I know the Republicans in the Senate are really, really very committed in their belief that this bill should be left alone. You know what? I know we have a lot more callers. I promise I will get to you. We need to take a real quick break, so I'll get back to your calls right after this.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation? conversation.
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts.
In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk. WCPT 820.
We are reading your texts and taking your calls. Let's go to Indiana, where our friend Dan is on the line. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hi, Joan. I'm doing okay. How are you?
Peachy. Just peachy.
Yeah, I love that. Peachy. I'm one of them that sent an early text, and the reason I called is I wasn't sure you were getting the text because I wanted to bring up the point that, little Mikey Johnson's going to adjourn Congress, and that stops anything. It has to be Congress is in session for the, for the 10-day things as far as it becoming law. Without that, it doesn't happen. Yeah. And God knows how long he'll keep them out. Who knows what's going on these days. But
I have to believe the Republicans in his own caucus, every congressperson is up for re-election every 2 years. What on earth are Republicans going to point to as something positive that they've done? What? Except for this housing bill, what has there been?
Well, as long as he gets the SAVE Act, what's the difference? Because then they can steal it anyway. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And one way or another, I'm figuring behind the closed doors, that's what's being worked on. But I'll have to say that I had some respect for a little bit for Bill Cassidy. And then, of course, they probably threatened his family. That's the way this works. And then, of course, he went ahead and voted for the Iran war. But the other thing, other than that, is the Supreme Court ruling that came down concerning Haitians, Syrians, God knows how many others, where they're going to round them up and send them all someplace. I don't know where. A lot of them are citizens, actual citizens. And if somebody doesn't see what's happening here by now, I don't think they ever will. Eventually they come for us is where we're at, and if somebody can't see that by now, they never will. But when they come for me, I'll be ready for them, Joan, is all I could say. End of my life, and I lived in Indiana. The only way, I just wish we could get out of here, but we can't. I'm the end of my life, mid-70s.
The only way out is through. So people like you, Dan, and me, we just have to keep fighting the good fight. And I still believe there are so many more of us than them. I think we can turn this cruise ship around. It's not fast. It's not easy, but it can be done.
God bless you. Have a great weekend.
You too, Dan. Thanks for the call.
All right. Bye.
Let's go to Hoffman Estates. Our friend Dave is on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, not only that Venezuela, they had the 7.5 with a 7.2 aftershock that did that. But I mentioned Lady B. I've been reading in Japan on Thursday, their time. There was a 6.9 quake which struck Japan's northeastern region during Thursday morning rush hour. Also, it mildly shook Tokyo. The 6.9 occurred off the eastern coast of Iwate. And I hadn't seen anything yet if there's any...
And as long as we're tallying up the big earthquakes, there's a report on MSN.com. Massive earthquakes hit Venezuela, Japan, and California in an 8-hour window. It's the end of the world as we know it, Dave.
Yeah, ain't that what the Bible thumpers say in Revelations, that they start getting more natural disasters and all this stuff. And waiting, had there been volcanoes blowing off? Because that usually triggers earthquakes too, right? Or vice versa. And
well, I would, with Japan, depending upon where exactly the quake was, you also have to worry about tsunamis.
Right. And from what I've seen, it didn't sound like it did anything with that nuclear reactor area.
Thank God.
So far, yeah. I mean, who knows how polluted that is already with that radioactive water that's been overflowing for a few years now. But here's an interesting story. A third of the military families report $500 or less in emergency savings, or none at all.
Yeah.
According to the results of a 2025 survey released this week, and it says emergency savings are commonly looked at as an indicator of financial well-being or stress or strain in that.
Yeah,
that's kind of spooky, you know.
It is. It is. I mean, if you don't, what happens? You know, if life goes exactly as it's supposed to, maybe you can live paycheck to paycheck. But what if you need to buy a new tire for your car? You know, what if your car breaks down? You know, what if something's at your house? What if the plumbing goes out? What if the furnace goes out? Those are not inexpensive repairs.
No. And real quick, so you get tired, today, you know, I'll do my Today in History for you. Today, June 25th, 1950, the 76th anniversary of when war broke out in Korea, as the forces of the commies from the north invaded the south, and that the conflict lasted for 3 years and would bring about an estimated 4 million deaths, three-quarters of them civilians. And lastly, 1973, former White House counsel John Dean began testifying before the Senate Watergate Committee, implicating top administration officials, including President Nixon, as well as himself, in the Watergate scandal and cover-up. So, anywho, let me clear off for you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Always good to talk to you. Appreciate it. Let us go to Hyde Park, where Keith is on the line. Hi, Keith. Thanks for the call today.
Hey, how you doing? This is Keith. Keith was in Hyde Park. Keith is stuck in traffic on the outbound Stevenson.
Okay. Keith, stuck in traffic on the outbound Stevenson. How are you today?
That's me. I'm doing great. You know what, John? I listen to you when I can, which is quite often. And I do listen to WCPT. You know, you get news that you don't get elsewhere. And whenever I can't listen to WCPT for whatever reason, I'm always listening to your sister station, KTRC in Santa Fe.
Well,
so you
excellent.
Guys do great work. Yeah, but I did want to call. You did trigger me. So I said, let me risk the call and just say, you know what? I share your passion with respect to the low performance of the Dems and the progressives. It's nothing new. It's been going on for a while. I'm an analyst. So I'm a numbers guy, and I attribute it to either of two things: the low appreciation of analysis. I get that all the time with what I do. Numbers tell us something, and then it is the basis for forward a leaning guidance. So that's number one. Or number two, even if you are the type that has an aptitude for analysis in order to get you from point A to B, you don't have enough like-minded people to join in and to brainstorm and come up with a scenario analysis in order to do that. So when you remarked that, Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer don't care, I got to push back on that. They do care. I've listened to that lecture. Schumer is getting up there in age, and so that may have impact, but they both are well-versed and experienced when it comes to the mechanics of their forum, right, in Congress. And so they do know that. I just think that the voters, we let them down in 2024. We really, really did. So they don't have a full tool to work with. But we as a Democratic, like a liberal progressive party, we are really good at turning out an emotion. But if we have another one of these no kings rallies with no analysis and no strategy, what does it mean? What is it good for? So they do care at the end of the day. That's what I want to leave with you. Mm-hmm. How's that sound?
It sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty good. I'd like to think that everybody cares, Keith.
They do. They do, but then they have to take the next step, which is to use math analysis. Not everyone has that aptitude, but they rely on those who do and leverage those strengths and really come up with a damn plan So the Republicans had a long game, an analytical plan in order to wrestle power away.
Yep, and they focused a lot of that while the Democrats were asleep at the wheel. Republicans spent 10 years taking over state legislatures. And then all of a sudden they were passing all these bills and everyone was like, what, huh? What? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, so, you know, I read something. I was watching a documentary. I remember back in the early 1900s to about the 60s, there was some complaint amongst the Republicans that they really couldn't win elections. So they embarked upon this strategy to do radical things in order to win elections finally. And so this, I say, goes back to the 70s, you know. Even when Carter was struggling, they were strategizing. And then when Reagan came on, that was the result of that wave of strategy. And then Bush continued that. And then, actually, yeah.
Well, and they were still doing it. I mean, look at Project 2025. I mean, I hope that there are some Democratic think tanks somewhere that are hiring experts to put together Project 2029. But if they're doing it, they're keeping it very, very quiet. But let's hope we can.
I don't think that they're doing that. I don't think they have.
Maybe they are, Keith. Maybe they just haven't told us yet.
Oh, Joan, the eternal optimist.
Well, thanks for the call, Keith, and I hope you get out of traffic soon. Take care, okay, and have a good weekend.
You too. Have a great one. Bye.
Let us go to Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hi, Joan. The sentences meted out in Texas defy imagination. 50 years, 70 years, life. And Trump, I can't even look at what is his lawyer's name? I don't know. What is his name? Trump's lawyer?
Which one? He's got a lot of them. Todd Blanche, are you talking about?
Yeah, Todd Blanche. He writes a little thing. He goes, well, Antifa's got to be punished. Antifa has got to be punished. Now, the Republicans are running on immigration, and all the authoritarian people in the world are running on immigration. For what reason? I don't know. Apparently, they convince people that if an immigrant comes in, you're going to lose, they're going to take food out of your mouth, whatever the case may be. I have no idea. But when you think about these Supreme Court rulings today, and when Trump lets in, the people who have carte blanche now are the white Afrikaners, who he swears that there's a genocide going on there, and they have to be let in immediately. Now, the Haitians, they put about 300,000 of them into jeopardy. There's real trouble in Haiti. You could be murdered in a minute down there. And, Joan, I worked with two Haitians, shoulder to shoulder with two Haitians. And when I was a kid, I'll never forget it. They would cheer me up, Joan. If I had the worst night in the world, I'd come to work that day. They'd cheer me up by lunch. I was laughing my behind off. But they were the nicest guys in the world. Why are we letting white Afrikaners in, and we won't let these poor Haitians in? I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Well, you know what Donald Trump says? He says that because the blacks are taking their land. You know how when the whites came and they took all this land from the native population, and now some of the people are saying, hey, you know what? You stole all that land. You need to give some of it back. And they're like, oh, no, it's our land. So it's a real mess. And those are the people Donald Trump has been pointing to, the ones who are in danger of having their land taken away. It's a difficult, sticky situation.
But what about the four Republican senators? Did they get cold feet and say, you know, they didn't give him the wars? You know, it's a symbolic vote, you know, to take away his war powers and then they got cold feet and granted him the war powers again. I don't know how that worked, but Republicans are crowing about it this morning. You know,
there's a lot of curiosity about what happened behind the scenes, but you know that's what Trump does. Some Republican tries to stand up against him. And behind the scenes, it's like, you know, carrot and stick. I don't know what kind of stick or carrot he could have offered Bill Cassidy, who he's already run through the mud, but whatever.
I know, but you think he had some kind of a, you know, mysterious I don't know. That's just so strange. 1 minute, they report that they've given him, they've taken away his autonomy over this war, and the next minute they give it back to him. It's just so strange. It's so strange. The whole thing is so strange. And it's 50 years, 70 years. Think of these kids. How did they be in their shoes looking at 50 years? We're the only country in the world that meets out these insane sentences, Joan.
Yeah,
if you're in Canada, in Europe, or something like that, I mean, they actually believe in rehabilitation at some point. 20, 30 years. I mean, by that time, if you're not straightened out by that time, good luck anyway. But these are just absolutely absurd. Anyway, Joan, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you,
Joan.
Jim.
Thank you.
And before we go to the news, you guys, you're very, very well informed, but you're very cynical. It has been pointed out to me that the 10-day clock for the housing bill doesn't start till the bill is sent to the White House, and Mike Johnson has neglected to send the bill. So the clock has not yet started. Good grief. We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
You're the only voice of reason on the radio.
You give me hope.
Having listened to you every day.
Thank you for your clear insight.
Always felt a little bit smarter.
I listen to you every single day.
I keep coming back to this station, and thank you for what you do.
On WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I'm very happy to welcome Christopher Armitage back to our airwaves. I'm always talking to you about the Substack he writes called The Existentialist Republic. He is somebody who doesn't just opine on the thoughts that occurred to him that morning. He talks about, here's a situation. Here's what you can do about it. Here's who you need to get in touch with to do something about it. And I love the fact that it is rooted in pragmatism. It is rooted in, not just, oh my gosh, there's a terrible thing happening, but there's a terrible thing happening, and this is how we can fix it. Christopher, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me back, Joan. It's always a pleasure.
There's a lot of your writing that I want to talk to you about, but first, I want to get your take. I mean, I'm reading so much about what happened in New York. Oh, Zoran Mamdani is a kingmaker. Oh, this is a sea change in the Democratic Party and a schism. I personally think all that is a little bit hyperbolic, but I'd love to get your take.
Oh, well, we need hope, right? People are very desperate for hope. And I think that part of what I'm always wary of in these situations is just if people feel like they're just going to be able to take their foot off the gas. Oh, cool. The situation's fixing itself. The situation's never going to fix itself. It is us versus very powerful interest. It is the same fight that's happened for all of, quote unquote, civilized human history. It's the people with a lot of power understand the assignment, and they're going to keep showing up, and they have a lot of resources, and they're very unified. And so they said, most humans live under tyranny. And so what happened in New York is amazing. It's largely the result, in my opinion, a mix of many factors. But one of the big things is, in 2015, Bernie Sanders decided to run for president and set some amazing things in motion. What a linchpin that campaign was. And 10 years later, I think we're seeing a lot of that organizing come to fruition. I think that over the last decade, there's been a maturation of activism where initially they were solely focused on the president, and then they started to realize we needed to win races in the House and Senate, and then they realized, okay, well, that's not as easy as we thought it was going to be. Well, now we're going to start focusing on city and state level politics, and that is where that movement that Bernie Sanders, was the linchpin of the modern version of, that movement is strong enough to change the makeup of your state house or to really build powerful vocal coalitions. I mean, you look at this new coalition that's sprouting up out of New York City. whether they're going to federal offices or state level offices, you're looking at something really similar to the Tea Party and how they started sending a very vocal, very populist, group that was seen as the more extremist wing of the party, but they had a level of enthusiasm behind them that was unparalleled. So it's a good thing, and I'm excited about it, but this isn't a series of dominoes falling. We have to keep showing up every day.
Well, absolutely. I mean, these people didn't get elected, because they looked good on paper. These people got elected because people got out and went to the polls and elected them. It's victory for getting up off the couch and doing something. And I really hope, people don't forget that. Don't think that this somehow came about just because of, I don't know, the wind started blowing in a different direction or something. That's one of the things I love about your writing, because you're all about, don't just bemoan this, do something about it, or pressure the people in your state to do something about it. You wrote, when was this? This was a little while ago. You wrote about this, and I didn't realize this, that you actually go around the country and do trainings for like Democratic groups and indivisible chapters. What do you usually, do they tell you what they want you to train them on, or is there something that you just always feel that they need to know?
Well, this has been a process of trial and error, showing up to places and seeing what works. The format that seems to work the best right now is an open forum where or town hall type thing. I take questions, and I really just want to ask people, what are you worried about? What are you trying to figure out as activists? Because the leadership committee will give me a different, their understanding is just from their perspective, and it's a smaller group. And so I just did this event in rural Washington state, in Winthrop, Washington, which if you Google it, it's a beautiful town, the Old West style. And it's 200 activists in a barn, an actual barn that was converted into the largest meeting hall in their town. And I spoke a little bit up top about a few different, my work on the taxonomy of state-level opposition to federal authoritarian capture. I talked about stochastic activism, those sorts of things. I did that for maybe 20 minutes. And then we opened it up, and one of the leadership people asked me a few questions. But the best part, my favorite part, is raise your hands, hand the person the microphone, and let them ask me. And that also helps me have a litmus test on where activists are at across the country. I mean, I'm talking about from Florida to Washington State. I'm working on putting more things together. I just got a van, so that way I don't have to fly to all these things. I'm in a road trip as much as I can between now and the 2028 election. But those meetings, those conversations, the number one thing I'm hearing is, I feel hopeless. I feel helpless. Actually, forget the hopelessness part. I feel helpless. And it's so, I love it because people tell me there's this problem, and I say, I have great news for you. In that event I just went to, when I first showed up, they said, we have 150 seats. We're not sure we'll fill it out. So don't, take it personally or anything. And they had 200 people show up for 150 seats. And because that tells you they want answers. Mm-hmm. And the answer is you feel helpless. Well, this group, you guys have been trying to influence federal politics. All their representatives in Washington state, their state House, their state Senate, and their U.S. House representatives are all Republicans. Most of them run unopposed. I said that the two, the state House and state Senate representatives that you have right here in the Methow Valley, they are Republicans who ran unopposed. Between that whole group, they probably have 20 volunteers. There's 200 people in this room. This room of people could pick what policies you care about and choose who your candidates are, and have launch with 10 times as many volunteers as these Republicans have. You could decide, you could be sending people to the state house who say, we are going to divest every bit of Washington state money that we can out of the companies that are attacking democracy and committing genocide. We are going to invest in a public bank so that we can fund robust social safety nets. You guys could be doing that, and you could be powerful at it. And there was a lot of enthusiasm around that message, and I've heard that in a lot of places.
That's amazing. And It is so true. You know, that's one of the things that I feel like I've been fighting the whole time I've been doing this show, this idea that, oh, Christopher, I'm just one person. You know, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if I fill out a witness slip. It doesn't really matter if I vote. I'm just one person and I can't affect any kind of change. So why bother? Why not just sit home and lay on the couch and watch television? That drives me insane, but it's out there.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal of fascism, right? And it's something I want people to understand. Like you mentioned up top about what happened in New York, it's not an emergent property. It's not something that just happens on its own. 1,000 different types of action cumulatively created that effect. You've heard me use the metaphor before with physics, where all of us are an atom, and movement creates heat, and heat allows for metal to become more malleable, right? And so if we just sit around and do nothing as individuals, we're not generating any heat. And good luck, turning a piece of metal into a sword if you don't apply heat to it. It'll just break. And there is things getting worse. I need people. This is a very important message. Things getting worse will not automatically mean that people stand up and turn to the streets, because you can go to many countries on this planet where you have starving, poor people who are basically slaves of their government, and they do not have they want to, sure, but things getting worse doesn't guarantee that we're going to come to the streets. That's not what it takes. There's no wait and see when it comes to fascism. So every day we make those decisions about how we're going to be one atom in the whole system, and we're going to generate that little bit of heat. And the more movement we make, and the more action we take, and the more we work to make our methods more sophisticated through educating ourselves and inspiring others, the more heat we will generate to mold this system.
I love that analogy. Christopher, we need to take a break. I'm talking to Christopher Armitage. You can read his writing at the Existentialist Republic on Substack. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Christopher Armitage, who writes a Substack called the Existentialist Republic. And one of the things that I love that you do, particularly when it comes to things going on in the state, is you say, this is something that's going on. Your state attorney general can do something about this. And, here are some steps that you can take, and reach out to your state attorney general. And also, I believe when we talked before, there have been certain state attorney generals that you have talked to directly. Do you find that they are receptive? And when people reach out to them, is that effective?
Well, ultimately, even the ones who are appointed act like politicians. Part of why I'm not terribly interested in taking those meetings very, very often anymore is because what I've seen is they need to hear from their constituents. They need to feel that there will be a political consequence to their decisions. Attorneys general and district attorneys largely feel insulated from public how the public feels on things, because they're attorneys. They're able to use the language of law to make it feel cloudy, to obfuscate what they are or are not doing. And they're really good at using the half measures that they're doing and announcing that like a full win. And I'm working on a piece right now actually related to this about the ideal of what an attorney general should be. And I'm hoping it gets a lot of clicks and a lot of shares, because I need people to understand, like, for every one of these offices, your governor, your attorney general, your district attorney, you should have an idea of what to expect out of them. What does a good mayor look like? What are they doing? There's things that are outside of their control too, right? Like Joe Biden got a lot of criticism for things that largely were outside of his control. So how do you as an individual, as a voter, have an idea without feeling overwhelmed of what to expect from your attorney general? And the answer is, this is supposed to be the people's attorney, your advocate. when I meet with these attorneys general, I think most of them need to lose their seat. And that's part of why I keep, I don't share too much of those conversations publicly because I want them to feel comfortable. But it's really difficult because when I speak to a governor or an attorney general, I've just seen this trend over the last decade of they are really enthusiastic about the ideas, but they don't move on it because their decisions are determined by political calculus and political capital. They're trying to figure out what's going to help me win re-election, what's going to avoid right now me getting the attention of Donald Trump and his regime. They're investigating their enemies. They're harassing the family members. When you sign up to run for office, you don't want your family to be getting investigated and brought in for FBI interviews because you did something the president or the current regime doesn't like. And I understand that. I sympathize with it. But those people need to resign. They need to leave their office because what we need are the tools that are being left on the table. Your attorney general could choose to investigate the Epstein files, or they could, in some states, they have to be referred by a district attorney or by a governor.
That's one of the things, that you've been talking a lot about. Nothing is going to happen at the federal level, especially not with Todd Blanche, at least allegedly in charge. So, what happened in your state, and are there... was there ever an Epstein house? Was there ever an Epstein party? Was there ever an Epstein anything in your state where your state could go after these people?
Absolutely. And these billionaires hang out all over the place. I'm in Washington State. What happened in Seattle? Surely their activities at some point. We have a right as the public to say, I want my attorney general investigating it. And what these attorney generals send back a lot of times to the public, because I want them to hear from their constituents, not for me. A good idea won't change even the best attorney general or governor's mind. That would take a very rare type of politician whose mind just gets changed because it's the right thing to do, unfortunately. But they get form letters back, constituents, and it says, look at all the civil suits I'm doing. Well, we need criminal investigations. We need you looking into the Epstein files. We need you looking into the Doge, theft of public information. We need a lot of these things, and this is what I want our attorney looking into. And so when they send that form letter back, I tell people, you email them back and you say, this is unacceptable. This is not what I want from you. And I promise you, I know your name. I'm going to share it with my neighbors. And I want them to know that you are not being the people's attorney. You are not being the attorney general we need. And I want the governor, I'm going to contact the governor about this, and I'm going to tell the governor how dissatisfactory this is. I'm going to contact my state house reps. I'm going to call all of them and try to get my neighbors, my indivisible group, my county Democrat group, whoever. And we are all going to try and let people know that you are acting like you're defending us, but really you're cowering.
Yeah. One thing that I'm always curious about when I think about these things is how much time is a reasonable amount of time to give someone to address a wrong or to act. And because I always say to my audience, legal time is not like real people time. Like, we had a local official, the FBI raided his office and everybody was like, oh my gosh, he's going to get charged with corruption. We waited a year, and then all of a sudden, a year later, there's all these charges. So, legal time isn't real people time. One of the people that I'm waiting to do something is Mary Moriarty in Hennepin County in Minnesota. She's the one who would have to bring charges against Jonathan Ross in the murder of Renee Good. And, she keeps saying, whenever she's pressed on it, well, we're working on it, but it's really hard because we're not getting any cooperation from the feds. And on the surface, that might seem like a decent argument, but I remember the prosecution of in the death of George Floyd, and that prosecutor had very little to go on other than a single video, for God's sake. And they were able to get a conviction. We have a number of videos, and I just think that it's very frustrating for me. But I don't know, am I being unfair to her? Does she want to get all of her ducks in a row so that when she brings charges, the case won't get thrown out? What do you think about things like that?
So one of the things we did at the Existentialist Republic is we built a prosecution memo addressing Jonathan Ross and Renee Good. And what we did was we looked at previous case law and the statutes, the criminal statutes in Minnesota. And so we looked at his conduct. We looked at the eyewitness statements. We looked at previous cases where police officers were were incarcerated, were sent to jail on that much evidence or less, and for materially identical conduct. When did people do the same thing with more or less evidence available and were sent to jail? And the prosecution memo that we put together was able to show that you could put Jonathan, like one of the things was second degree manslaughter, a few different charges. We put together a series of them because one of the strategies you want to employ in that sort of situation is undercharging. So as a former law enforcement officer, I'll tell you, county attorneys, county prosecutors, district attorneys, they have a tactic that they do to help law enforcement where they overcharge a crime. They will purposefully charge at a higher level than the evidence supports, so the case ends up not meeting that standard and the officer doesn't get in trouble. So if you really want to put a police officer away for a crime or anybody away for a crime, you undercharge it. So that way you know the evidence you have as a prosecutor well exceeds that. The case we were able to put together at the Existentialist Republic in our prosecution memo was able to show that you could put Jonathan Ross away for a minimum of 40 years. And that was with publicly available evidence looking at materially identical cases using just the evidence available to the public. Derek Chauvin, it took 4 days for them to arrest him with as you said, with far less evidence. And an important question, people mention the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause, for those who don't know, says that the state government can't do anything that interferes with federal government activities. But it does not protect criminal activity. There is no law, not even a Supreme Court decision, not Trump versus United States, nothing that says that just because you're a federal government employee, even maybe given an unlawful order, that you're allowed to commit crimes. And so if two officers do the same thing, but one of them is an ICE agent and one of them is in the Minneapolis Police Department, it's a crime if the conduct is the same. It doesn't not become a crime because it's an ICE agent. And so that immediately destroys your supremacy laws. But yes, Mary Moriarty is being dishonest about the situation because I shouldn't read intent into actions, but I'll do it. She doesn't want to have the Trump administration coming after her. Yeah. It makes sense. Please resign, ma'am.
Well, I know when this was first a hot issue, Keith Ellison kept getting all these calls, and finally he had the people in his office say, call Mary Moriarty. This isn't something that is the purview of my office. It is up to Mary Moriarty to bring charges, because his aides said they were getting hundreds of calls every day, like, why aren't you doing something? And I can only imagine that those calls went to Moriarty's office, but she certainly seems pretty feckless.
Yeah, well, I was just looking at, and maybe I'll write a piece about this. I was looking at internet searches for different keywords. So Epstein files was one of them, Renee Good, Jonathan Ross, Mary Moriarty, a bunch of these that are these big moments. And the fact is, these offices are right when they make the assumption that if they just ignore something, eventually the public moves on to another subject. The Epstein files, it was a huge spike for a couple of weeks of people talking about it. Well, then we went to war and 100 other disasters. And it's the same with Mary Moriarty. It's the same with, Renee Good's murder, with Alex Pretty's murder. Is if you're a politician right now, today, the math says it's better to just let people be mad, let them send their phone calls. They'll get over it. And once the dust clears, we'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. And when Mary Moriarty went on MSNBC, they didn't challenge her on this. When and even she was asked, could you charge with the currently available evidence? And she sidestepped the question. And nobody held her to account for that. Nobody asked a follow-up question. And so her search engine results are not really addressing that criticism. I mean, I'm on Substack, I'm on Medium, but the big platforms aren't challenging her about that. And that's a fight. We have to change the math. That's when I say all of that, it's not hopeless. Like, we can change that, but it really takes, I'm going to do another post talking about the murders of Renee Good and Alex Pretty. But I know that those are probably going to get 10% as much engagement as they did 3 months ago. And that's tough. But I'm still going to do it because they'll get more phone calls and they'll still know some people care. And maybe I'll be wrong. And I want to be wrong. And I'm only going to find out if I'm wrong, if I give it my best try and I put the article out there anyway.
I'm speaking with Christopher Armitage. He writes The Existentialist Republic on Substack. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Visit ComEd.com/facility assessment to learn more about energy savings.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with Christopher Armitage, who writes The Existentialist Republic on Substack, and it is a wonderful guide to what you can do and who you need to pressure to get things done. Christopher, I want to play something for you. I read a lot of people, and one of the people I follow is former Illinois Congressman, current Texas resident, Adam Kinzinger. And, you know, a lot of people have kind of been waiting for him to do something other than just post these commentary on what's going on right now. And it appears that he has finally decided to take a more substantive action. Here is the ad that he released, I think, today.
For years, Washington has failed to hold itself accountable to the American people. Trust me, I lived it. Too many politicians are afraid to tell the truth. They're afraid to show courage. They've become enablers, more focused on protecting themselves than protecting our democracy. Today, we're watching the rule of law bent to the will of one man because too few leaders are willing to stand up and say enough. So what do we do about it? We back the bold. Today, I'm launching Back the Bold PAC to restore accountability in Washington and support leaders who are willing to fight for it. And yes, that means backing Democrats willing to take on Republicans who put loyalty to Donald Trump ahead of loyalty to America. We need to make sure the politicians who enable Trump and his chaos never hold office again. If they won't stand up for our democracy, then we'll find leaders who will. It's time to back the bold.
That is Adam Kinzinger announcing a new political PAC that he is forming, Back the Bold. And it seems to me it's interesting timing, especially since we had some rather bold candidates elected in New York. Are these two things connected, this idea that, and I frankly hear it on my text line all the time, I'm not going to vote for a Democrat who says, let's turn the other cheek, let's just move on. I want to vote for a Democrat who says, I'm going to do these great things for you, but we're also going to go back, and the people who broke the law, we're going to bring them to justice. It kind of seems to me that there's this whole tsunami of this kind of attitude. Your thoughts, Christopher?
Absolutely. That's where the public is. And the politicians who realize that will be buoyed. You know, I think 10 years ago, I talked about this Bernie thing as an inflection point, and I don't really hear it being discussed. I've been meaning to write on it because it's been on my mind a lot. I think that, you know, the candidates and the infrastructure at lower levels are just finally catching up to things, and they're meeting the moment of public sentiment, because that is the public sentiment right now, is we want people held accountable. I mean, so much of what's happening right now can be traced back to us letting Nixon off the hook, right? And Reagan off the hook, and George W. Bush off the hook. Seems like a lot of Republicans have been let off the hook. And then these politicians, you know, and Democrat politicians, well, I get they see them every day. I mean, you see the same thing in law enforcement. I saw it as a law enforcement officer. Familiarity breeds a camaraderie, even with people you're oppositional with. And, well, you're rarely opposite. I mean, largely they work together, or they're supposed to. And so, you know, the George Carlin quote, it's a big club and we ain't in it. So the politicians who figure this out will succeed. And if there is one thing that determines what a politician will or won't do, it's election and re-election. Now, I think there's also foreign intelligence services in the mix. I think right now it would be ridiculous to think that the current administration isn't using intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies to gather blackmail political opponents and political allies. That is a real thing that we should all just take a moment to think about, you know, because they've purged these agencies of loyalists. But look, if you don't have somebody running who's willing to say, no, these people belong in jail, we need our own Nuremberg trials for Epstein and the rolling coup and all these January 6th, and we need attorneys general and House members and state House members who are going to say, whatever I can do, I will find new powers in my office. I'm going to find new ways. I will discover a way to fight for you. I will create new tools. Let the courts knock them down. Let the Supreme Court tell me that I can't do it, but I'm going to damn try. And that is what the voters want. They want that tenacity. That's, the DNC has a 15% approval rating, and Donald Trump has a 30% approval rating. That tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, it absolutely does. You mentioned, we talked very, very briefly in passing about the Epstein files. I will tell you, Christopher, I don't know about the rest of the country, but my listeners will not let this go, and I'm glad of it. And they want me to talk about the Epstein files every day. And when I don't, I get texts about what did you say about the Epstein files today? So I know you've written about the Epstein files. I'm putting this off on you. You can be my Epstein file updater for today so that nobody yells at me anymore. What have you been writing about?
Well, I really try to focus on the lightning rather than the thunder. When it comes to the Epstein files, stories, I'll get frustrated sometimes. There's this whole thing about the reflecting pool in Washington, all the algae, all these stories related to that. And I'm just like, I want to talk about how we haven't arrested a single person in the Epstein files. We haven't charged a single person. It was largely victims whose information was put out. They released less than half of the total files, and those were redacted the names of perpetrators and included information on the victims. And what I want to encourage people, forget the thunder. We're here for the lightning, okay? If you want to do something today to be that atom that's acting, moving, generating heat that helps the system change, the way that you can do that is by contacting every representative you have. Every single one of them, state house, state senate, governor, attorney general, U.S. House, U.S. Senate, mayor, city council, and at every level you say, the Epstein files touched every part of this country. Right now, we know that they are not just not being investigated by the federal government, they're being covered up. If a politician wants to tell you that the federal government isn't covering this up, they're part of the enemy. I'm sorry. That's true. Because you're not willing to admit reality at that point. It is very obvious that the FBI and the DOJ are complicit. They are helping to hide crimes. And after all this is over, we need to put them in jail too. What are you going to do when most of the people at the FBI, most of the people at the DOJ chose to follow unlawful orders? But what you can do, who's listening to this, is you contact your state house rep and you say, hey, I want my tax dollars to fund an investigative organization, an investigative committee that looks into the Epstein files, everything that we have publicly, and dedicates serious resources into seeing if any of that intersects with state criminal law. And if it intersects with another state's criminal law, refer it to them, release the information publicly, because that's what we can do. There is no reason that your state can't call Donald Trump, Bill Gates, whoever you can think of who's related to the files. They can all be getting called in for depositions by your city or your state. All of that can happen, and you can ask everybody in the chain of command.
All right. Do you hear that, people? First of all, you should know who your state rep is and your state senator. And if you don't, that's the first order of business. Find out who they are. You can look them up online. You get their office number, their address, their email, sometimes even their phone number. And you can make your voice heard on this. By the way, did you think it was interesting that when Pam Bondi, after she was fired, when she spoke before Congress, that she the whole Epstein thing, well, she turned that over to Todd Blanche. She didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing at all. It was all Todd Blanche. If you have questions, anything to do with Epstein, you better ask Todd Blanche, because, you know, he was my number 2, and I just put him in charge of this. Talk about throwing him under the bus. Not that, the two of the nicest people on the planet, and they deserve one another. I thought that was really bold of her to say before Congress. And do you believe it?
It was telling. I don't believe anything these people say. That's just a good presumption, right? Presume they'll be dishonest. Presume bad intent. But an important thing to realize, I think, is like any time the Trump administration replaces somebody, they're replacing them with someone worse. Just guaranteed. Someone who's going to be more complicit, more willing, less qualified, and more willing to break the law for, Daddy Trump. And that is what we're facing. Is she threw him under the bus? They're all going to throw each other under the bus. But they also, they don't think they're doing everything they can to make sure we don't have free and fair elections. And I got news for folks. We already don't. We know that. I saw this story earlier about how, not to shift it too much, but I just want to mention, I saw this story earlier about how it's a Democrat states are winning in courts with not turning over their voter rolls. Every Republican state turned over their voter rolls. That means in those states, they're already going to suppress the vote substantially. They're going to be able to remove people from the voter rolls more aggressively. Every Republican state will open the doors to voter intimidation. How do you take your country back? How do you get a veto-proof majority? How do you get a conviction-ready impeachment majority? You cannot, and that's their goal. They don't need to win every race. They need to make it unfair enough in the places they control that Democrats can never use the existing mechanisms to take control or meaningfully hold these people accountable. And then people like Todd Blanche just continue to get awarded.
Yeah. I'm talking to Christopher Armitage, who writes The Existentialist Republic on Substack. We're going to take a break and continue this discussion in just a couple of minutes.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking with Christopher Armitage. You can find him on Substack. Look up The Existentialist Republic. I want to talk a little bit, Christopher, about Donald Trump. I've always understood that he doesn't care about the country. He doesn't care. He doesn't have any real political positions. Honestly, I doubt he even cares that much about his family. It's all about him. It's all about what can you do for me? And if I have to do something for you, you better do something for me. And I've even read where people say that he hopes that whoever the Republican nominee in 2028 is loses. So that way he can say, look, all you guys, it wasn't ever the party. It was all me. You needed me. And he seems to have a death wish. I mean, he's 3 Republican senators that he has alienated because they're no longer going to be in office because he ran MAGAs against them and they lost. Stopping the housing bill, which is the one thing that Republicans could point to in the midterms to say, look, we did this. Isn't this great? It was bipartisan. We did this. It's John Thune said before the big Wednesday lunch that this was going to be a time where they were really going to, have a firm conversation with Donald Trump and make sure he understood that there simply, under no circumstances, were there enough votes for the SAVE Act. And yet he's still, it's like, aside from a screaming match with Bill Cassidy, which was frankly pretty amusing, he's still clinging to this idea that somehow he can pressure, that he can batter senators into getting this horrible voting law passed, which they've tried to tell him there aren't enough votes for. He seems to be single-handedly destroying elected Republicans and also kind of the Republican Party. What do you think?
Well, They're trying to create a situation where elections don't matter, where elections don't decide who's in charge. They want to make sure that the people who support them are easily able to vote, and the people who don't support them are not easily able to vote. Now, today, Donald Trump has a 30% approval rating. That might sound bad. I think George W. Bush cratered at about 26 or 24, but America has far less free or fair elections than we did in 2004 or 2000. Citizens United didn't even get passed until 2008, and while a lot of people blame the Democrats for the 2010 midterms, I blame Citizens United. Our election, we are a far, far, far orders of magnitude less democratic nation than we were 20 years ago, and the actions of Trump, the Republicans understand. They don't want to need public support. When you gerrymander districts and you make sure that 30% is in charge, something that scares me is, thanks to all of this, these actions that they're taking, is Democrats will, win by 15, 20% nationwide, but have slim majorities in the House and Senate. And those slim majorities are going to be held responsible by the voters and the Democrat leadership, and it'll be worse than Biden, because Biden still managed to get a couple things done. But what I really worry about is, sure, Trump will keep alienating people. He will maintain loyalty in the party. The party will continue to make elections unfair, and Democrats will win, and then they'll be held accountable by the voters, and the propaganda machine will do its thing, and more people will feel like, well, yeah, the system's broken. So I guess the Democrats weren't able to fix everything the Republicans destroyed, so we better just vote for more Republicans, or the Democrats just give up and stop showing up.
But the fact that Donald Trump is like, everything that goes wrong is Obama's fault or Biden's fault. And I think people are getting tired of that. Even, obviously this audience for this station doesn't buy it, but I think even his followers are like, like, how could everything? Oh, it's been 10 years since Obama was in office, and yet it's still his fault that this happened or that happened. I don't know. I don't think he's helping himself, Christopher.
Oh, he's certainly not. And he understands, free and fair elections are the greatest threat to him. Because he knows that the tide has turned. He knows that people are angry. I look at the electoral map and the public discourse today compared to 2015, and I see people who understand. I've met people who voted for Donald Trump and regret it. I've met them. Now, they were largely people who are anti-vaxxers / libertarian, but they've admitted that they were wrong and
what
that
do they
no
say?
longer support
What do they
him.
say about, did they feel they were hoodwinked or that they counted on a promise that wasn't fulfilled? What are those people saying who voted for Trump and are now disillusioned?
So, the libertarians and just the pure apolitical anti-vaxxers largely supported him because of him getting RFK Jr. on board. And I talk a lot with libertarians, especially. They're my favorite people to argue with, actually. And but that really does seem to be the thing, actually. I think that I really wonder if that one factor was changed, if Trump hadn't brought RFK on board, if he would have lost. And but that is what I see these people. They talk about how we went to war. The libertarian folks, they don't like the law enforcement officers being allowed to detain people and deny them their constitutional rights. And the anti-vax type folks, they understand that what's going on is not pro-freedom and it's not good for the public, and they do feel hoodwinked. And also there is a small subsect too of people who are would-be granola-eating lefties generally. Not that I don't love granola, but they hung out, they go to jiu-jitsu, and they were just like, yeah, well, Donald Trump's the anti-war candidate and Kamala Harris is the pro-war candidate. And so I do think that Democrats are going to have wins in the midterms. I also believe that the system wasn't able to put Donald Trump away after an insurrection. After 2016 to 2020, when you look at what he did in those 4 years, as far as corruption and criminal activity. He called the president of a foreign nation and said, give me dirt on my political opponent. He called Zelensky and said, give me dirt on Biden. That just resulted in impeachment. Why didn't it result in sedition charges? Why did January 6th not result in seditious conspiracy charges and treason charges? They had, from 2016 to 2020, we were told Letitia James et al. Are putting together cases on Donald Trump. They just want to wait till he's not president to go after him, which wrong decision in hindsight, but okay, we'll move on. But they had from 2020 to 2024 to put him away. The system could not put Donald Trump, of all people, in a jail cell, and he became president again. I don't believe that there's even a once-in-a-generation landslide is going to give us so many victories that we get the Nuremberg trial type treatment that we need to restore this country. And that's why I advocate for state-level solutions. Mm-hmm. Because that federal government, Republicans didn't just start capturing it. After World War II, a lot of very powerful people were upset that we sided against the Nazis. And, they at one point, the business plot, they wanted to overthrow the government because they didn't like socialist policies that were being implemented. And FDR, they wanted him gone. And that failed. But then they realized, well, we can just start funding elections and running for Congress. So this is a, post-World War II plot that we're dealing with that is all built to minimize the voice of we the people and maximize the voice of the powerful. And it's not going to get fixed in one election cycle, as much as I would love for that to be the case.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who blame, well, there's plenty of blame to go around, but I think part of the reason my audience is, we've got to hold people accountable for what they did, is that it seems to a lot of people that Merrick Garland took over the DOJ with this attitude, we're not going to look back, we're going to look forward, and we're not going to go after those guys. We're just going to move forward and make this country better. And so it was a year or more before there was any talk of a special prosecutor. If Jack Smith had had another year, so much could have been different. And I think people are just sick of that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that anger is what this country was founded on, isn't it? Like, gosh, we're tired of people being above the law and able to act with impunity. Let's start a democracy. Let's start a nation started on Enlightenment ideals. What an amazing idea. Then this country was built on and we've strayed from. And so, yeah, Merrick Garland was a failure. And I actually respect Joe Biden for a lot of things. He's the first U.S. president to walk a picket line, for example. But his desire or his wish to seem apolitical resulted in a political outcome because he wasn't willing to just state plainly what the facts of the situation were. And he should have fired Merrick. But, we can play that game all day. I will say J.B. Pritzker has talked about putting these people in jail more than Newsom. And we all know they're going to be two of the top people in the race for president. And so J.B. Pritzker talked about it. He said it. And gosh, being willing to say, like, hey, these people are committing treason and they belong in jail, that is an encouraging thing to hear. And I gotta think that Jack Smith would be in the running for Attorney General. And so I
unless Jack Smith is just so sick of us that he doesn't want to, that he's just going to go do court cases at The Hague from now till the end of time.
Well, there's probably plenty of really smart, good people who'd be willing to take the role and act with some courage. And, Biden played the same Obama play of bipartisanship. But you can't be bipartisan by hiring fascists. Mm-hmm. That just won't work out. Yeah.
I went to a 50th anniversary presentation for the 50th anniversary of the whole Watergate mess, and Jill Wine-Banks, who was a prosecutor, was there, and so was John Dean, and they both said that looking back on it, John Dean as well, thinks it was a mistake not to prosecute Nixon, even though everybody just, let's move on. He thinks that set a bad precedent precedent that was carried forward into the, oh, well, we're not going to look back. We're just going to look forward. I thought, Jill Wine-Banks, of course, she wanted to prosecute him at the time. But for John Dean to say, you know what, it was, with 2020 hindsight, it was an absolute mistake not to prosecute Nixon. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, well, you know what? I would be willing to be a single issue voter if the one issue was, Donald Trump, George W. Bush, they can both get tossed in a jail cell for their acts. Because, George W. Bush committed war crimes, too. Like, actual war crimes are committed under his regime. That's law and order. I want law and order that isn't going after people living under bridges. I want law and order that's going after corrupt politicians who help kill innocent people, who take our tax dollars and hurt us. That's what I want. Let me be that single issue voter, and I invite others to join me in that. Because I bet we take care of that problem. We take care of the Epstein files. We take care of all that. And all of a sudden, getting universal health care starts to look a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Sure does, doesn't it? Thank you, Christopher, so much for being here. I love talking with you. The hour just flies by, and that is because of your ability to express your ideas so clearly, and they're great ideas to start with, which is always a plus. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to our next chat.
We are going to take a break for news, and we will be back with more after that.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Very happy to say hello to Sean Casten, the congressperson who represents Illinois' 6th District. There is a lot of congressional news. Sean, how are you? Are you having a good summer so far?
Hello, Joan. Nice to see you. I have no idea what you're talking about, congressional news. We show up and we don't vote on things, but I'm curious to hear what you wanted to talk about.
Well, why hasn't Mike Johnson sent this bipartisan housing bill to Trump? I mean, is this an effort to what? To help his buddy out? I mean, his Republican congresspeople don't have a whole lot of positive things to campaign on in the midterms, and this would have probably topped the list. So is his loyalty to Trump greater than his loyalty to the people who voted him Speaker?
Look, I can and have spent many hours trying to pop psychologize the shadow soulless boy that is Mike Johnson. I think in this case, let's give him some time before seeing whether we say he's not willing to send it to Trump. The dynamic, and just so that everybody understands, the minute he sends that to Trump, it becomes law in 10 days if Trump doesn't veto. If Trump vetoes, it would come back to the House and the Senate, where if everybody who voted for that bill in the House and Senate votes to override the veto is overridden. And that would be a political problem for Trump. It would be a political problem for the Republicans if they did that. What I think happened today is that Mike Johnson went to the White House with the expectation that maybe he could find a way to deal with the fact that he has a completely unpredictable person in the White House, and he has completely unpredictable people in his own caucus who have said that they're basically going to shut down everything on the floor. And my read of today is that he took a decision that he is better able to get through this if he gives everybody a couple days to cool off and then come back next week. He may be right, he may be wrong, but I would not conclude that he is not going to send it to the president for a signature until we see what happens next week.
When you say allowed everybody to cool off, are you talking about the shouting match that apparently Bill Cassidy had with Donald Trump at the Senate Republican luncheon yesterday?
I am speaking only about the chaos in the House, not on the Senate side, but that's certainly there as well. We had this separate issue this week that when that bill came back to the House floor, we had enough votes to pass it under suspension, which means it didn't have to go to the Rules Committee. And Anna Paulina Luna, member from Florida, who is a little crazy, she said that if that bill came to the floor, that she would oppose the rule that would allow us to do the normal business of the House this week. The rule is the thing that you do every week that says, what are we voting on this week? What are the terms of debate? How much time for debate? Can the bills be amended? It's procedural stuff. But because they have such thin margins, she was able effectively to say, I'll grind the House to a halt. We then passed it anyway. Trump then, planned the press conference for the signing ceremony and canceled the press conference. And Luna then got, I believe, Max Miller from Ohio, then also said that he would support her in those efforts. And so that craziness in the House meant that Johnson can't bring any bills to the floor unless he brings a bill to the floor, the SAVE Act, which is designed to prevent women from voting, literally, that he can't, if he brings that bill to the floor, even if it were to pass in the House, it can't break the filibuster in the Senate. And so it's DOA regardless. Meanwhile, there are serious things we should be doing, right? I mean, we have serious issues going on in the Middle East. The housing bill was really important. We really do have a housing affordability crisis. Mm-hmm. And, I think as someone who cares about my constituents, I really would have liked to see that bill become law. As someone who is a Democrat, I was a little bit anxious about the fact that the Republicans could reasonably say after signing that, look at what we did under Republican leadership with this overwhelmingly bipartisan bill to bring affordable housing forward. It boggles my mind why they thought politically it was a good idea to basically blow up a bipartisan housing bill that every American wants. In order to fight for something that really only matters to the base of the Republican Party.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I don't understand. John Thune, who's not exactly a rebel, said before the Wednesday lunch that, the Republican senators were going to have a honest, blunt conversation with the president, that he had to understand that it was simply a numbers game. There were not the votes for the SAVE Act. There were never going to be enough votes for the SAVE Act. Even if the filibuster was somehow gotten rid of, we're not going to pass the SAVE Act. And yet, like a dog with a bone, Donald Trump continues to try to blackmail everybody into passing the SAVE Act. Look, I understand being passionate about something. I understand maybe feeling that something is the key to your staying in power. But when your own people say, it's never going to happen, we have to move on, it is never going to happen. How do you not listen to that?
Well, I want to be careful how I frame this because I'm not necessarily making a prediction about the future, but there are so many almost perfect parallels between the second term of Donald Trump and the second term of Richard Nixon.
Ooh.
When Nixon dropped below about 40% favorability rating was when he fired Haldeman and Dean, and the wheels started to come off the bus. When Trump dropped below 40% favorability was when he fired Bondi and Noem. When Nixon dropped below 30% favorability was when the Republican Party turned on him and forced him to resign. Trump is not yet below 30% favorability, but in that interim between 40% and 30% for Nixon, that was sort of the last year of his term, that was when all the paranoia kicked in. And I think I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but I think you are looking at Donald Trump and someone who knows that the wheels are coming off the bus, who knows that his own party is starting to turn on him because they don't want to hitch themselves to his wagon. You're seeing that in some of the fireworks that you mentioned from Senator Cassidy, some of what, Senator Tillis has done, and I don't want to praise Republicans for finally doing what Democrats do every day, but I do think that there's a logic to what Trump is doing of saying, I know that I am not popular. I know people don't like me. I know people who used to like me don't like me anymore. And I do not have the maturity or the intellectual tools, mental health issues with Donald Trump. Maybe Nixon had his paranoid schizophrenia. Trump has narcissism and, some form of early onset dementia. But I think there is some of what you're seeing is not explained by logic, but by panic.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I've heard people say, well, sooner or later we're going to have to invoke the 25th Amendment. But correct me if I'm wrong. It is the cabinet that has to say this person is unfit for office. And I can't see this cabinet of clowns. Let's go around the table and we're all going to tell you how wonderful you are and how amazing you are and how everybody loves you. This is not a cabinet that's ever going to do that. What will happen if this guy goes even more seriously off the rails? I mean, when he was bombing Iran, he sort of implied in a couple of his statements that he was really willing to up the ante, and everybody wondered, does that mean he thinks he's going to use nukes? I mean, it is a terrifying time.
Well, I mean, the blessing and the curse of this country is the limitations of our Constitution. It's a blessing that, no one person can change the course of history because of the checks and balances. It's a curse because if you put people of low character in positions of great power, you can't guarantee that the Constitution will be enforced. And and again, I'm not making a prediction, but there's only two ways, short of tragedy, that a president can leave office before their term is up. One is through impeachment and one is through the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment really wasn't written with the idea that this was to remove the president, that provision that allows for the vice president to remove was written in the wake of Kennedy. And so if you read sort of the sections of the 25th Amendment, the first one says if the president is, what's the plan of succession if the president is, dies early? Let's clarify that. There's then provisions that are sometimes referred to as the colonoscopy provisions that says if you are temporarily unable to do the job of president, how do you make sure that there's continuity of government? For example, if you're under general anesthesia for a colonoscopy. Mm-hmm. There's then this final part of the 25th Amendment that says what happens if it's a non-scheduled procedure, something happens that you are indefinitely unable to do the job. And that's where the 25th Amendment, the provisions you're talking about kick in, where the vice president and the cabinet can make a decision based on what they go through. And that has to be revisited with the idea that, maybe something horrible happened, but now you're good and can work again. That door has never been tried. Jamie Raskin has pointed out that, we haven't really clarified all the language that's implied in the 25th Amendment about the panel of medical experts who would opine on this. In theory, it could happen. The closest we've ever got to this before, and again, history is not guaranteed to repeat itself, but was under Nixon when the Republican Party realized that there were the votes there to impeach and remove in the Senate and convince Nixon to resign politically before that happened. I'm not guaranteeing that's what happens this time. Obviously, I don't think anything like that would happen until the Democrats had control of at least one chamber in the Congress. But you're right; it's a very dangerous moment when you have someone who, as deeply self-serving and as deeply unpatriotic as Donald Trump, surrounded by sycophants.
Congressman Sean Casten, thank you so much for being here today and sharing some of your busy day with us.
Thank you, John.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Another of our favorite congressional reps to speak to is Jonathan Jackson, who represents Illinois' 1st District. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Joan. I appreciate you. Keep up the great work.
Well, I do my best, as I know you do too. Hey, I want to talk to you about all of the Supreme Court rulings that came down today. I follow a lot of mainstream media, but my favorite is always the Guardian U.S. version because they have the best headlines. For today's Supreme Court decisions, the headline is this: Supreme Court conservatives accused of advancing white supremacist agenda. And man, if that just doesn't cut to the heart of it, I don't know what does. What, if anything, can we do about this?
Well, you've heard the expression, yes, we can. We are now 131 days away from the midterms on November 3rd of 2026. We have to turn that to yes, we will turn out and vote. And we're going to have to vote in overwhelming numbers. The attacks on the voting participation has already begun. When you see the votes had already been cast in Louisiana, after Louisiana versus Calais, that came out on, April 29th, that elections field already started voting in Louisiana, 48,000 people, and the governor put a hold on future ballots. So what happens to those 48,000 votes? They've now gone up in limbo. And this is already happening now. This is election engineering. The president has other cases before the United States Supreme Court on Trump versus CASA, where they're going to talk about birthright citizenship, this temporary protective status. They've got military on the streets in Washington, D.C. You've seen them coming to Chicago for raids. I expect the president to use the military in this election cycle. So we're in some very unprecedented, uncharted territory, and we're going to have to overwhelm the polls. Yeah. Overwhelm the polls in every direction.
And I think we're going to have to mentally prepare ourselves, because I agree with you, whether it's the National Guard, whether it's ICE, whether it is just some of the Proud Boys who he enlists, I think there's going to be a real effort to intimidate voters for this midterm election. And I sure hope that state board of elections folks are preparing for lots of different contingencies so that they can react quickly when some of these potential scenarios happen. Do you feel that's going on?
I certainly hope so. And so, of course, we don't have one federal election. We have 50 states and a confederacy that vote all on and alternative dates and times. There are not federal, if you will, guidelines on voting. You would really be shocked and surprised that there's not even a constitutional amendment on the right to vote. I mean, our most sacred trust is not constitutionally protected. You might have been convicted of one crime in Maine and have a different consequence that deals with your voting rights as opposed to being in Mississippi. So shouldn't the federal government have something to say on every citizen having its right protected to vote? So Congressman Mark Buchanan and Congressman Ro Khanna and I have put together an amendment, a constitutional amendment, to have a protected right to vote where you can't take people off of the roll. And if you've paid your debt back to society, you have a right to come back and be a full citizen. You can't be a second-class citizen for life. And what the president is doing now is now on this mail-in ballot, that's going to be a big issue on when he is weaponizing the post office on saying which votes were in, which weren't. I can give a classic example of what happened in the state of Georgia with Rossberger when the president called down there and said, give me 11,780 votes. Well, that may be 2 bags of mail. Mm-hmm. He's saying stop the count. You know what? And let's remember that in Trump versus Florida, when he went against Al Gore, when George Bush went against Al Gore in the 2000 election, he stopped the count of the vote. So technically, George Bush won the presidency by like 528 votes. And there are still ballots in the state of Florida that have never been counted since the year 2000. They stopped the count. Not everyone's vote had been counted to this very day in the state of Florida. So there's some very fragile check engine lights that we should be concerned about in our voting apparatus.
What can we as voters do to prepare, Jonathan?
You know, Joan, overwhelm the polls. Call the state senators, call your U.S. senators. What's happened in Louisiana versus Calais. Illinois is not being affected by that. We have great people in the Speaker of the House and the governor and his leadership, but our neighboring states, so our friends and families, we have to alert them on what's going on. Joan, you know, one of the things that really surprised me when I got into the Congress, you know, I'm the father of 3, married, and I don't know that much about reproductive health and other things, but I've got a young daughter, and of course, I care about these things. But the stories that I've been able to hear as United States representative and the attacks that are happening on women probably been one of the most alarming things that I've seen since my time here in the United States Congress. There's a great institution in Chicago, CAF, the Chicago Abortion Fund. I'm a religious person, go to church. I'm the bipartisan co-chair, the National Prayer Breakfast, all that kind of good stuff. But I also believe that a woman should do what she has, what's in her best interest for her body. But do you realize that since Roe versus Wade has been overturned, that there are 400 women that are now have felony convictions that have crimes against their own body for having to make decisions about their life and their health, some things that men don't necessarily have to think about, being pregnant and having to have cancer treatment and whether or not to take your baby to term, to life, the complications and pregnancies and all kind of things, you know, all the things that can happen to women biologically, that these women's rights have been overturned. And this one institution I was just sharing with you about, the state gives them money so they can help women that need assistance, that they have to travel to clinics or facilities, that may need housing, may need food in order to get some medical care. And so they do great work. Do you realize that institution is now helping women in 19 states that have to come to Illinois for reproductive health care? I mean, it just blows me away. So even when they say that women have choice in the state of Wisconsin, there are only 3 counties in the state of Wisconsin that let women have choices. So I'm born in 1966. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965. I'm the first generation of Americans born with equal rights. And now the president with the Supreme Court is dismantling the tools that we've had to ensure equality, diversity, inclusivity, all the great programs of curb cuts for people that are differently able, that need wheelchair assistance, and all the things that we've gone into on women's athletics and women's research and the health care that they need. All those programs are now being called DEI and radical, and they've cut the funding for it. So, no, I'm very much concerned about what's happening. So that one thing, as we focus on women's reproductive health, which is family health, which is societal health, we have to fix that, and we can fix everything else.
Yeah. I've been talking this week to women who are part of a program called Fair and Just, and it's women who have had pregnancy complications. They have been denied abortions and what the result was with their body and their family. And they've been on Capitol Hill the last couple of days talking to legislators to try to get people to understand what this issue is all about. And I think, I hope that legislators are taking it to heart, because if Republicans stay in power, sooner or later, they are going to try to write up some kind of federal ban, and God help the women of this country if that comes to pass. Jonathan, I hear Mike Johnson has called a recess. So are you going to be holding some town halls, or I don't know how long you're going to be in recess? Probably till Donald Trump decides to give up on the SAVE Act. But are you going to be meeting with constituents?
Yeah, we're supposed to be back in session on Monday. There are some thoughts that he may cancel for next week as well. We're not going to find that out until a little bit later. And there are certain things that are happening with this administration, I try to fly above the partisanship, but it's just so ridiculous. There was a great bill that was passed on the housing, and heaven knows we need housing assistance. It was bipartisan, led by Congresswoman Maxine Waters and Congressman French Hill, Democrat and a Republican. French Hill's a banker, and we know Congresswoman Maxine Waters. It was bicameral. It went through the Senate and through the House. All the president had to do yesterday was to sign it into law. It was supposed to happen in the rotunda yesterday at 11 o'clock. The stage was built, the lights were on, and the president, within 30 minutes of the signing, says, canceled. He tweets it out, doesn't call anyone. Then he wants to berate Senator Thune, Murkowski, and Cassidy. And as the tea goes in the back room, chitter-chatter, they pushed back and walked out. They walked out on him. Like, how can you cancel a bill signing because now you want to insert your authority, your power on something that nobody wants, on the SAVE Act, and therefore you're going to gut this housing opportunity where our constituents need it. So they were so frustrated. So Speaker Johnson, essentially lost control of his caucus. He cannot bring the votes in, so he canceled votes for today at the afternoon, and that was for tomorrow. That's canceled. So we're on standby to see if we come back next week, Monday.
Well, thanks for joining us. And man, oh man, there's a lot going on in Congress, and we are paying attention to it every day. Thanks for joining us, Jonathan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Find rebates and discounts on energy-efficient products at ComEd.com/home savings. Oh, hi. I forgot. It's Joan Esposito. I haven't yet told you today about 120 Life, a drink made with ingredients that support healthy blood pressure. My mom had high blood pressure, took medicine her whole life. For many of us, it runs in the family. 120 Life is a great-tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure. See if it works for you. Some people saw results in as little as 2 weeks. And I've been enjoying 120 Life because it's a fruit drink that isn't overly sugary sweet. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund and you can get a 20% discount. Use the code JOAN, Joan, for 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Heartland Signal is our digital arm. You can find a lot of good reporting over there. And once a week, we ask Heartland Signal reporter Rich Eberwein to come on to the radio with us and tell us about some of the reporting they've been doing, some stories we might have otherwise missed. Rich, how are you?
Doing well, Joan. How about yourself?
Oh, my gosh. I just can't imagine ever being better.
Really?
I don't know.
For some reason, I don't believe you. No.
Oh, God help me.
Busy day, busy day.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
so what have you got for us?
So I'm going to start over in Ohio. The Ohio governor's race, Vivek Ramaswamy is the Republican candidate in that race. And a few months back, Heartland Signal reported on him, shelling out close to $800,000 on private jet travel as he campaigns around the state running for governor. And so we followed that up, wrote up something that the Rooster originally reported on, a local outlet in Ohio. He's continuing to do that. It looked like for a minute that his private jet travel was slowing down because the original jet he was using has been grounded for a couple of months. But this new report shows that published the flight logs for a different private jet. So he has two that he's been using over the last couple months.
Now, does he pay for this himself, or is he charging this to his campaign funds?
So the first report that we did, his campaign told us that he is covering the costs with his own money, and we did not hear back from his campaign this time around on whether he is covering these costs with his own money or not. But he did donate $25 million to his own campaign recently. These costs could be being covered by him. But yeah, we
but
don't know for sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe we're getting used to people running for office, using private air transportation. But, in a state like Ohio, where a lot of people are struggling economically, it would seem to be a bad look. Hey, I'm rich, Look at me. Look at my private jet. Here it comes, because God knows I can't drive 2 hours to get to your town.
Yeah, that's exactly what his Democratic opponents, Amy Acton, who's running for governor, and David Pepper, who's her running mate. This is exactly the type of criticism that they're levying towards Ramaswamy in a state that, is being ravaged by the affordability crisis, just like any other, and also has been under Republican control for the last 15 years, where they've passed a lot of policies that have frankly benefited the rich in that state, like incorporating a flat income tax where people making $30,000 pay the same amount in taxes as billionaires do in the state. Other tax loopholes that benefit rich people. So this is a state that has been, it seems like clamoring for different types of policies. Mm-hmm. And, Pepper and Amy Acton have been kind of saying that how can this guy who is a multi-billionaire who flies around the state and not a very large state in a private jet campaigning for governor, they labeled him out of touch with the voters in Ohio. And we've kind of seen that reflected in recent polling where Amy Acton has taken a little bit of a lead in some of those polls.
Well, didn't he also sort of alienate himself with a lot of voters because he didn't seem to understand, like, poverty?
I mean, how could he, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars pumping up different companies and selling his shares in them, and he lives in a different world than the regular voter of Ohio does. Another report from the Ohio Capital Journal this week showed that he has also racked up over $500,000 on his campaign credit card, and has not disclosed each individual transaction, which is what state law requires him to do. So he's effectively hiding what he's spending his campaign credit, where this campaign money is going towards. He's spending an exorbitant amount of money for, who knows what. We know private jet travel is one of the things, but
mm-hmm. Well, the cost of jet fuel has gone up. Maybe not $500,000 worth, but yeah. I mean, if the law says he's got to itemize this, he's clearly in violation of campaign law, right?
Yeah, and the office that would handle that is the Secretary of State, I think, and that is controlled by Republicans. So I don't know if there would be a legitimate investigation. It's hard to believe. I mean, this is also the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, who had campaigned on ending gerrymandering, and they've continued to gerrymander the state of Ohio. It's hard to believe that he would do a legitimate investigation into these receipts that on the campaign credit card, but we'll see.
Okay. All right, what else have we got?
So in Wisconsin, Heartline Signal obtained some audio of a GOP assembly candidate, David Daniels. This is a guy running for the 53rd Assembly District, which is or incorporates the town of Neenah, Wisconsin. So a couple months ago, or earlier this month, actually, he was attending a farmer's market in Neenah and was caught on audio saying that he believes that abortion procedures should not happen after 6 weeks, and we have the clip of this.
We've seen world fears and beliefs too, Minnesota and Illinois and Michigan, and I don't like what's turned out. So, we're seeing at-term abortions going on in Minneapolis right now. It's not. That's not. I don't believe that should be a thing at all. I believe women should have a good health care system. get the services they need, the counseling they need, if they come to a lifetime decision, all that. But at that point, after 6 weeks, I don't think it should be. After 6 weeks, it should be allowed. No.
I think
Once you start hearing a heartbeat and stuff, that's a life.
Oh, I hate that. 6 weeks is absurd. That's essentially a complete abortion ban. And this whole idea of heartbeat is so misleading. When a fetus is developing, there is a certain point when the cells begin to differentiate, and cells that will become a part of the electrical system, like the electrical system that runs the heart, they begin to flicker. It is not a heartbeat. There is no heart. And it drives me crazy because the implication is, oh my God, you're killing a child, which you are not. And that's all I have to say about it, Rich.
Yeah. These comments align him with some of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country. Like you were saying, 6 weeks, it's essentially a near total abortion ban. Many women don't even know they're pregnant at that point, at that stage of the pregnancy. And this is something that, a district that he's running in probably would not agree with him on. This is a district, it's a swing district in the Wisconsin Assembly. It was decided by less than 400 votes in 2024. Wow. And I think this is important because the Wisconsin GOP has controlled the state legislature for a very long time, since the early 2010s. And they've routinely overseen abortion restrictions and tried to ban abortion and restrict it in any way that they possibly can, including leaving a law on the books from 1849 that was nearly a sweeping abortion ban that halted procedures in the state for a time until the Wisconsin Supreme Court threw it out last year. And they continue to advocate for more restrictions and have some still on the books, like mandatory 24-hour waiting period, mandatory ultrasound, mandatory counseling. All of these things just hinder a woman's ability to conduct her own healthcare decisions in the state. And if Republicans continue to have a majority there and, possibly retain this seat, that would continue presumably in the state. So this is one of those districts that could decide which party controls one of the chambers in the legislature. And we know where David Daniels stands for sure.
I am so tired of these Wisconsin elections that make or break something. I only have so much worry in me, Rich, and I think I used it all up getting the Supreme Court races settled in Wisconsin. It's like always like, oh, by the way, this particular, it's just one race, but it's going to determine this whole other thing. That seems to be the story of Wisconsin.
It's a story of a lot of swing district or swing states, right? And it's a story up in Wisconsin because they got rid of the gerrymandered map. So, all of those swingy districts, toss-up districts, each one of them could decide which party controls. So, that's just the nature of that state. And that's
I like that swingy districts.
Yeah,
that's swingies.
There's a lot of swingies up there.
Yeah. Interesting. Swingies. Okay. Works for me.
Speaking of swing states, speaking of swingies, the last story I have for you is over in Michigan. There was an interesting endorsement today that we wrote about. Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland endorsed Abdul El-Sayed in the Michigan primary election for the U.S. Senate race. And Abdul El-Sayed is backed by Bernie Sanders. He's seen as the progressive in this race. He's one of his main platforms is advocating for Medicare for all. So Chris Van Hollen is only the second U.S. senator in Congress to endorse El-Sayed's candidacy, which I think is a pretty big deal. I mean, the only other one was Bernie Sanders. And, this kind of continues this trend of Chris Van Hollen, going more towards that progressive wing of the party that Bernie Sanders is a part of. And this is an election as well in Michigan that is very important, and people are, kind of seeing as maybe where the future of this Democratic Party is going. Are we going towards continuing to go towards more centrist candidates like Haley Stevens or Mallory McMorrow, or towards more progressive candidates like Abdul Al-Sayed? And, we're seeing this endorsement come, the same week a lot of progressives did very well in the New York elections on Tuesday. And so I thought it was interesting to highlight and see where we stand on this, right? Like it's, Al-Sayed is also performing very well in different polls as well. Mitchell Research and Communications released a poll on June 16th where he was ahead of Haley Stevens by 9 points. So we are seeing a swing state, Michigan, trending more towards this progressive candidate. And we always hear that candidates like this can't win in a state like Michigan, a toss-up state. It's not blue enough, but, I think it would have a lot of implications for the future of the Democratic Party if Abdul Al-Sayed not only wins this primary election, but wins this general election as well.
Well, now you're telling me got to worry about Michigan too? Thank you. Thank you. Just put a little more pressure on me, why don't you?
I'm sorry, Joan. I didn't mean to do that to you.
Okay. At least this isn't Friday and you haven't ruined my weekend. Hopefully I can work in the next 24 hours. I can work through this.
One more day to recover
yeah.
from my segment.
Rich, thank you so much for joining me and sharing those stories. I really appreciate it.
Of course, Joan. I'll talk to you next time, okay?
Rich Eberwein, heartlandsignal.com. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Hey, are you interested in refinancing? You have questions about your credit score, or you're in an unusual situation with your family and you need advice? Call Team Hochberg, our trusted local lender. Cindy and her sister inherited their mom's home when she died. Cindy had been living with and helping as her mom's caregiver. She wanted to buy the home, so she called Team Hochberg for a free consultation. David helped Cindy get a mortgage to buy the home from her mother's estate, allowing her sister to get her share of the equity. David helped Cindy get a mortgage so they could get their mother's home into her hands with still being fair to her sister. Death can be overwhelming. So if you've experienced a family loss and want to purchase a property from the estate, call Team Hochberg, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped me refinance a couple of times. They've helped thousands of our listeners, and they have more than or nearly 800 five-star Google reviews. So call 855-563-2843 or go online, 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Very pleased to welcome Anushka Thatakura to our program. Anusha is the executive director of the Citizen Action of Illinois, and this is an organization that pays attention to policy platforms and legislation. The 2026 legislative scorecard is out, and Anusha is here to talk with us about it. Anusha, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joan.
I was looking over the scorecard, trying to decide perhaps which I was going to talk to you about, and good grief, there's 25 different line items here. So pick out a few and talk about them. I mean, there's end-of-life support, school disability, plastic pellets control, hospital financial assistance, et cetera, et cetera. So of this list, which one or two or three would you like to highlight?
Well, that's funny you say that, Joan, because even though we've highlighted about 25 bills, that's a very, very small selection from the thousands of bills Yeah, that legislators are discussing, and very few of them make it to the finish line to a point where we can actually score legislators on how they voted. Many bills die in the darkness and silence. So we have just these few bills that we wanted to select from a broad range of categories, like you mentioned, across environmental justice, LGBTQ plus rights, disability, worker protections, consumer protections, and healthcare, which is an area that we've done a lot of work in. So I will first talk about one bill to establish a prescription drug affordability board. And before I dive into the bills, I want to talk about why this is important. Many people might think, I know my legislator, they're great. Maybe they're progressive and they're good on all the issues. Well, I will flag for you that many bills on this scorecard, even though we have Democratic supermajorities in both chambers, did not pass along party lines. So, for example, the bill to establish a prescription drug affordability board, which we've been working on for years, passed out of the House with 62 votes when we have 78 Democrats. And the Senate is still able to consider it. And that's a bill that would lower the price of prescription medication. It would establish a board to regulate the drug industry and lower healthcare costs at a time where healthcare costs are rising for millions of Americans. So that's definitely a bill I want to highlight. There's a few others. One that would protect medication for LGBTQ plus folks whose medication could be potentially tracked by the federal government. It stops the state from tracking those prescriptions and other health records privacy initiatives as well. I also want to flag a voting rights piece of legislation on our agenda. This passed both chambers, the Jesse Jackson Sr. Young Voter Empowerment Law, which requires Illinois school districts to provide all eligible high school seniors with the opportunity to register to vote before graduation. There's a lot of data that shows that when people have the opportunity to register in a setting that they trust, like a school setting, they're far more likely to actually be registered and vote. And this is just a selection of the bills on our scorecard. If you search Citizen Action Scorecard or you go to citizenaction-il.org, you can find our scorecard and learn more about the bills and how your legislators voted.
Give that web address again.
Yes, citizenaction-il.org/scorecard.
And you make such a great point, and I'm so glad you made that point. That, okay, I voted for the Democrat. They got in office. Now I can just stop paying attention because, they're a Democrat and I can be assured that they'll vote for the things I want them to vote for. You have to pay attention. Every state rep, every state senator, pretty much every elected official has a website. You can go to their website. You can see how they voted. And if you get a notice, like there are witness slips available for a certain issue, fill one out, but also let your elected representatives know how you want them to vote. That is such an important point, and one that you are absolutely right. People don't think about that.
People don't think about it. And if you go to our scorecard, you can find your legislator, search them up, both your House member and your senator, and see exactly how they voted on these different bills. We also have a tool at the bottom of the page. If your legislator scored 100% rating, you can send them a thank you because they want to hear from you, not just when they're considering legislation or hear from you when you're angry about a vote. It's really important that we recognize legislators who are standing up for the public interest in Springfield.
That is another important point because it's so easy to get mad and say, I don't like the fact that you did this. But it is equally important to say, you did that and that was great. I really feel well represented. Anusha Thatakura from Citizen Action Illinois, Executive Director, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you, Joan.
A pleasure. That is going to do it for me today. Driving it home with Patty Vasquez is, of course, next. I will be here tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's Friday. We like to roll into the weekend with something a little lighter. So we're going to talk to Rebecca Ford and Scott Duff about the TV shows, movies, plays, other things that we have seen that we want to recommend to you. So that is always a hoot. And so please join us for that. Also, as I said, Patty Vasquez is up next. She's going to be joined by co-host Peter Sorellis and Warren, I think it's Pre of Source Solar. and she's going to talk to the Democratic Party of DuPage County Chair Reed McCollum. Tomorrow, Richard Chu starts our day. He's got a long list of guests, including Barbara McQuaid, one of the sisters-in-law, great attorney and law professor. Okay, have a great evening. Have some fun. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Good night.